Not all games can succeed, of course. While people usually work very hard for a long time on developing some of our favorite games, not all are fated to be as successful. And yet, developers still put lots of long hours into games, regardless of whether or not they are deemed a success. Welcome back, my fellow gamers. This is Top 10 Gaming, and I'm your host, Amanda McKnight. Today we're going to be focusing on games which weren't as successful, but showed some promise. At least we thought they did before they came out. So much promise, in fact, that we wonder what would have happened should they have succeeded, becoming hits or simply avoiding being cancelled. What if they hadn't been held back by what cursed them and instead became potential Game of the Year candidates? Join me as we count down the top 10 failed games that would have changed everything. And if you've ever had a game you are hyped for fail you and you feel our pain, be sure to click that like. Alright, let's get counting. Number 10. Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey. Ancestors is a game that was recently released last year in 2019. Many people were excited for the game, which is a survival game that allows you to play starting out as an ape, working towards surviving and evolving as time goes on into a man. Many players found that the game was too challenging to start and that when you did get the hang of it, it wasn't rewarding enough when you did succeed. Not only that, but successful strategies were limited, making the game feel predictable once you got the hang of it and pretty monotonous. Games like this failing is always upsetting because it's off-the-wall ideas like this that we need to see succeed if we are ever going to see the expansion and, well, evolution of the gaming world. Number 9. Horizon Zero Dawn. While people are likely excited about Horizon Forbidden West, the greatly anticipated sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, when the original game first released, it wasn't without its problems. Horizon Zero Dawn was met with some pretty questionable critical reviews upon its release. So, in what way did this game fail exactly? Because now I'm pretty sure we all agree it's pretty awesome. It wasn't necessarily that the game wasn't amazing. The game was amazing. It was more of an issue of success when it came to gameplay. The game had been released with tons of glitches, which frustrated players who had been so excited for it. What's more, because the game was so stunning, many of these glitches affected gameplay in a negative way. If Horizon Zero Dawn had been released without these glitches, it could have been not just a great game, but potentially have been celebrated as the best game ever, or the best game of the last decade. And we'd likely not just be seeing a single sequel, but potentially spin-off games as well in addition. Number 8. Mass Effect Andromeda. Andromeda was another game that received flack for technical issues, although in Andromeda's case, its glitches did affect its reviews. For Horizon Zero Dawn, that wasn't as much the case. As a result, Andromeda received many middling reviews, with some reviewers even referring to it as a broken game. This game has since been patched and is of course much more enjoyable and playable now than it was at the time of its release. But having a sort of independent story from other Mass Effect games meant that had it been released more polished and had it been super successful, this could have potentially revived and revitalized the Mass Effect and BioWare game fandom. Unfortunately, development was rushed, and as a result, its release and critical success suffered. Number 7. Tomb Raider: Angel of Darkness. If Angel of Darkness hadn't flopped as hard as it did, we may have never had to reset the Tomb Raider franchise. When Angel of Darkness was released in 2003, it was met with middling reviews despite going platinum for sales on PlayStation. It was a financial success but a critical failure, with gameplay especially being heavily criticized. This was the game that also prompted the reboot of the Tomb Raider franchise, with us not getting another title from Tomb Raider until 2006, 3 years later, which was Tomb Raider Legend, which basically restarted the whole thing. And then in 2013 we did that again. Oh my goodness. Number 6. Bravo Team VR. Bravo Team was a VR FPS game released on PlayStation in 2018. While the developer behind the game, Supermassive Games, has seen success with previous titles like the survival horror game Until Dawn, the game Bravo Team was a very different project, and one that they aimed to do in around a fifth of the time. Until Dawn took about 5 years for them to make. Bravo Team only took 13 months. As such, the game was released and was criticized for being dull and glitchy. Making a successful FPS VR game could have given the developer another avenue when it came to breaking into a new genre. Bravo Team's success could have also expanded and improved upon the new genre that is FPS shooters. Sadly, it missed the mark. Get it? Missed the mark? Because it's a shooting game. Anyways. Moving on. Number 5. FNAF World. This game unfortunately was simply rushed too fast, but was meant to bring a unique gaming experience to the world of FNAF. Scott Cawthon wanted to create an RPG game set in the FNAF world, something very different from the other games in that franchise. However, his excitement to release the game was his downfall in this case. Cawthon is used to his games being built relatively fast and ended up releasing FNAF World even ahead of its original expected release date. What ended up happening? Well, the game wasn't as polished as it could have been, and many critics commented that it felt incomplete. This is why it's bad to rush RPG games. Patches were released to fix up glitches and refine features, but in the end, Scott ultimately decided to remove the game as he felt that many of the game's problems were unfortunately unfixable as they had come into play early in development. In other words, in order to fix them, he would need to completely remake the game. If the game had succeeded, we could have seen the genre of FNAF games in the future expand outward to include more than perhaps just survival horror, and we could have potentially seen even more FNAF RPG sequels to follow up FNAF World. Can you imagine? Number 4. No Man's Sky. This game was likely such a flop because it was so hyped. When it was originally announced at the 2013 VGX Awards, it was considered to be one of the best prospects of the awards show. Many were excited for a space game that was so massive and allowed you to explore so many different planets. The game allowed players to generate over 18 quintillion unique planets. That's a lot of planets. The problem? Because there were so many different planets, you'd usually find that many only had slight differences from the ones that you'd previously explored. Now, this game has since received updates, and in 2020 it's looking a lot better, as it seems there is now more to do in the game. But originally, this game was one of the biggest disappointments of 2016. If it had been a success when it was originally released, it could have affected all kinds of exciting changes and improvements when it came to the way space exploration was done and explored in games, as it still remains hard to make space exploration in games feel grounded, without it simply feeling modular, like you're exploring a bunch of boxes. Number 3. Superman 64. Could you imagine if 90 superhero games like Superman had been well received? Where would we be now? There might be even greater superhero games than we've already had. We might be further along in exploring the superhero experience and stories as they relate to gameplay. But we'll never know how far ahead we could be now, and part of the blame can be placed on one of the worst games of all time, Nintendo 64's Superman game. The game was rushed and as such was awful across the board. It was buggy with terrible graphics and glitchy player controls. Just everything was bad in it. Number 2. Duke Nukem Forever. Duke Nukem was a popular franchise of games where players would take control of the macho, badass protagonist, Duke Nukem. However, after the game Duke Nukem 3D, which was released in 1996, fans were made to wait forever for the newest title. Licensing issues and production delays ended up meaning that the game, which had started development in the 90s, was not released until 2011. And it was because it had started development in the 90s that when it was finally released, many fans were disappointed. It just looked and played like an outdated game. Now, for context, I'd like you to also remember that 2011 was the same year that Skyrim was released. So yeah, if you're comparing these two titles in terms of graphics, it's easy to see why so many people were disappointed. Had this game not been a flop, the Duke Nukem franchise could have still been around today. While there have been re-releases of the Nukem classics, we have not seen a completely new Duke Nukem game released since 2011 with Duke Nukem Forever, which, understandable, that game was pretty terrible. Number 1. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. E.T. the Extraterrestrial is deemed one of the biggest video game failures of all time, and is also widely regarded as one of the worst games out there. I have to say, I've seen it played, and yeah, it looks pretty frustratingly bad. The game was rushed for holiday release in 1982, following the film's release, the film E.T. If you don't know what I'm talking about because you haven't seen it. Also, if you haven't seen E.T., what are you doing with your life? Go watch that. However, because this game was such a flop, it was rumored that Atari actually took the remaining unsold cartridges of the game and other Atari games and buried them in a landfill in New Mexico. What's more crazy is this rumor was actually confirmed to be true in 2014 when they dug up that landfill. With the decline of Atari starting in the 80s, right around the time of this game's release, it makes me wonder if the E.T. game had been more successful, would we possibly still have Atari today? Would it be like PlayStation, Atari, Xbox, and you'd be like, which console do I pick? Oh, a Nintendo, but we all have Nintendo consoles, let's be honest. It's not a competition there. Thank you so much for watching. What are some of the biggest gaming failures that you experienced firsthand? Which new games are you most excited for and hope don't don't fail? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Gaming, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you to keep on gaming on. Pew pew! Well, the development game behind the game. Wait, what? Well, the development behind the game, I think, is all I mean to say. Well, the development behind the game, the developer, that's what they are, I think. Publisher, developer.